Welcome to a new era of American innovation, a podcast series from Google and custom content from WSJ. I'm Brian Kamenetsky, Senior Editor, Custom Content from WSJ, joined today by Mira Lane, VP of Technology and Society at Google, and filmmaker Dave Clark, co-founder and Chief Creative Officer at Promise. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Brian. Happy to be here.
Excited to be here. Thanks, Brian.
We'd like to discuss today how creative expression is changing in an age of AI, but I'd first like to learn a little bit about what you guys do. Mira, you launched the Envisioning Studio at Google. Can you tell us what that is and what your team focuses on?
I thought it was really important to have a group of creative people thinking optimistically, but also clear-eyed about the future. And so the studio is a prototyping lab. It has a group of designers, philosophers, engineers, program managers, lots of different types of people that come together that help imagine possibilities. And one thing that's really important about the studio is that it's done in partnership with society. So there's an outside-in type of collaboration that we do. We do a lot of work with artists, musicians, filmmakers, and it's really important for us to have that virtuous cycle of, co-creating, getting that feedback, and then putting those ideas right back into product or back into the models that we're working on. And then we create this virtuous cycle of innovation between technologists and people in society.
Dave?
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder of Promise Studios. So we're a film and television entertainment studio, and we're kind of built around this new generative AI technology. So think of it as kind of these new emerging artists who are using some of these tools like Gen AI to create film, TV, and different narrative content, and then matching them with technologists that some of them come from the Hollywood ecosystem, but some of them also are more from the tech side, and kind of putting them together in this melting pot of new creation and execution.
How have you seen the influence of technology as a tool for creative expression change over time?
I think about someone like myself. Like I was always a tinkerer, so no matter what I could get my hands on, I was always just trying to tell stories and tell narratives and create worlds. So I remember very specifically kind of being there when, 3D animation came out, and that was a whole thing. I remember there being this backlash between some of the filmmakers who were using some of the, shooting on film and not wanting to use digital. And I was like, no, I'm going to use digital because I can actually afford to tell my story. And there was like an aha moment for me that at that time. And then when I started using generative tools and generative AI, it was also like a moment where I knew I had to dive in because I knew it was another moment in time where a new technology was going to allow filmmakers and new voices an opportunity to tell their stories.
So you look at this as a mechanism to be able to tell your stories more effectively and just sort of opening up that opportunity?
For me personally, as a filmmaker, I think it allows me to dream as big as I want to. And I think a lot of independent filmmakers who started off in Hollywood, most of the time they were told to, make super contained scripts and you can only have one person in your movie. But I want 100 people in my movie, and I want to be in 30 different worlds. And I think, these new AI tools allow you to at least visualize and iterate on that type of story world.
Mira, how does technology influence the way that you work?
I'm also an artist as well. And so in my creative journey, I do a lot of filmmaking, a lot of writing. I do some music as well. And AI is just a really great creative partner. So for artists, it's really hard sometimes to take the idea that's in your head and actually visualize it, get it out there in a level of fidelity that is compelling, exciting, and AI helps you do that. And so these technologies are really powerful creative tools to help you explore, create, communicate ideas, pitch them. I think technology is a catalyst. It's an area of a surface area for innovation, and it's something we're experimenting with. We want to understand what the possibilities are with these new technologies.
Dave, the use of technology in filmmaking is not new. Technology influences special effects. It influences editing, post-production, all throughout the process. What's different, though, about this new AI-driven generation of tools than perhaps what we've seen before?
I think it's kind of what Mira was saying. For the first time, I think any artist from anywhere in the world can pick up a tool and get what's in their head onto a screen, onto a visual. Like I remember specifically about 5 years ago, I was going around town pitching a pretty big idea, big script that I think a lot of the executives at the time were having a hard time picturing because they've never seen that type of setup before, that type of world. And I think that happens a lot in Hollywood when you're trying to get across an idea. There's just nothing been done before that's in that same vein. So I think for the first time ever with these tools, you can actually get almost down to the pixel exactly what's in your head as an artist and as a filmmaker. And that has been super helpful when I'm, currently, in pre-production, I'm trying to work with my production artists and my visual effects artists. I'm trying to explain to them what the world should feel like, how the characters should move, things like that. Like I can actually go in and create that. And I think that's a superpower that once people realize they can unlock as an artist, like it's just, there hasn't been a technology in my history that's been this transformational for creatives.
So Google has developed Flow. Can you describe, Mira, what that is and how your team was involved in the process of creating it?
Yeah, so Flow is a filmmaking tool, and you can create some really powerful short films. You can start with an image and generate a video from it. You could take a beginning screen and an end screen and generate the in-between. You can just use text and generate video from just a prompt. My team was involved in bringing artists in and to help get that feedback cycle going between the artists and the product team. And then we also have a small prototyping team that runs up a little further ahead than the product team, because oftentimes what they're doing is they're trying to get the fundamental product up and running. But then we hear from filmmakers like Dave and others on things that they want and need, and we go ahead and prototype those and kind of help the product team figure out what that roadmap looks like. So we're just an extension of that team, collaborative partners, I'd say.
How important is it to have technology that is sort of driven by and developed by the creatives themselves, people who are out there doing the work?
The one thing I tell a lot of some of the engineering team is, really sit down with filmmakers. And we actually did that with Flow when designing that product. How does an artist interact with the tool, right? It's different than if you're just trying to create, something for social or something, or just an image or something to share with your friends. If you're actually truly trying to tell a narrative or a story, there's a certain process, there's a certain cadence you want to be able to interact with these new generative tools with. So I think there's a nice dance between artists and technology, I think, within that UI. And they made it pretty simple. It's not convoluted. There's not a lot of different screens you have to go to. It kind of happens in one. I guess that's why it's called Flow.
Yeah. Because
it kind of just flows as you're moving along in a project.
How big is the issue of access, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I went to a school that didn't have an art program, and I feel like there's a lot of places like this around the world that they just don't have access to specific cameras and specific tools. And I think if you're able to give them a powerful tool in a way where they don't have to purchase something that costs, their whole entire parent's salary for the year, all of a sudden you're going to start seeing these emerging voices have a chance. People always try to think about, this new technology coming in and being a replacement of things. But they never think about actually what it's going to be, how it's going to add to the actual industry and how it's going to allow more creative voices to have an opportunity. And, people also in this same conversation want to complain about the same type of movie that keeps coming out every year. But that's because it's the same type of people telling the stories. Let's give some new voices a shot. And I think these tools are going to start doing that.
Mira, in your experience, how does AI influence different forms of art differently? How does it work in visual arts versus music versus film and so on?
Each of those domains has very different needs. For music, for example, you're riffing between writing your lyrics. You might be humming, you might be creating a mumble track out of it. And there's just a different process. For filmmaking, some of it is around previs, getting your ideas out there, sketching them out, communicating it out. For writing, some of it is, getting feedback on your script or getting feedback on your book. And so the tools are pretty diverse, and people can interact with them in different ways. They can bring media back and forth across them. So there's just a lot of flexibility in the tools.
Yeah. Dave?
I think most directors, most filmmakers, they want a certain level of control, and some of them think that AI actually takes that control away. And to some extent, some of the technology works one way, but if you actually get in there and know how to use the tools, you can get them to get to the vision that you want. And I think what I try to tell a lot of people who are new to AI is it's not very easy to make a long form piece of content using this tool. It's actually much harder, I think, in some aspects. So not only do you have to try to master these new tools, but you have to know which tools to use at the specific moments of your film.
You have to have a good story as well. I think that's the other part, because these tools, they can generate really things really quickly, but if your story isn't that great, it's just not going to be that compelling.
Dave, when it comes to the collaboration between people and AI, you've made note of how people need to be in control of this process. How do you ensure that happens?
There's always this layer of human creativity and narrative storytelling that comes from lived experiences, that even if, a certain AI tool is trained in a specific way, you still have to bring your POV to make it a film worth watching, I believe. No matter how great the tools get, because at the end of the day, if people are already complaining about movies being the same movie every single year, then you're going to have to bring a real good POV to make your movie stand out and be even more different.
This is about humans fundamentally controlling the story, driving the narrative, and not giving that up, and making sure that there is like great storytelling. I know there's this narrative around like AI slop, right? And we are all worried about just the market being flooded with content that is low quality. Well, how do we counteract that? We also need to create the space for great storytelling and elevating voices and bringing really great, tasteful content out there and making sure that that human story is, front and center.
How important is education in these questions of helping people understand how the tools work, where mistakes can be made, whether purposefully or not, so that they understand if I'm going to use these tools in my artistic pursuits, that I am doing it responsibly, that I am doing it in a way that honors other people's work.
I think that's the education part is fundamental, and I think AI literacy is actually fundamental in this moment. Knowing how to use the tools responsibly, knowing that you need to bring in your own content, not somebody else's content, and that you're building off of things that are uniquely yours is actually really important. Knowing what you can then later do with it as well, and what needs to get fundamentally transformed in order for you to have ownership over it. I think that that's important.
So as we close, what excites you both about the future of creativity?
I think that there are so many interesting stories out there that we don't get to hear. And I'm just excited about hearing more interesting stories, more diverse stories, more complicated, nuanced, things that maybe just get filtered out because it's really expensive to make films right now, or it takes too long. Or it's just dominated by a certain group of filmmakers. People have such interesting human stories, and we're missing out on those. So I'm really excited to just see more creativity and more of those stories.
Dave, what excites you about the future of creativity?
I just look at these new generations of storytellers, these world builders who are young, and giving them an opportunity to grow up with this technology in this new way. I think it's going to lead to some exciting formats.
Yeah.
Because those people aren't going to be bound by the same rules that we feel like we have.
No.
Yeah, they already live in their own worlds.
They have different rules already. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave Clark, Mira Lane, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.